Thank you, Lucas, and awesome to be here at the Zoom CX Summit. Easy to say if you're a Swedish-Australian futurist. Now, as a futurist, I'm also a little bit of a traditionalist and, dare I say, a humanist. And what I really want to explore here today is the intersection of human intelligence and artificial intelligence in an era where science fiction is fast becoming science fact. Now, speaking of science fiction, let me take you back to this science fiction movie, Ex Machina, a movie about the Turing test. What's the Turing test? The Turing test is an imitation game where in a blind test, a human doesn't know whether it's interfacing or interacting with a human or with a robot. And with the robot is so sophisticated that it can fool us into thinking we're interacting with another human being. Does this sound eerily familiar to some things we might have experienced recently with the rise of artificial intelligence? You bet. And in this movie, the directors and the producers, the marketing team behind this movie thought, how are we going to launch this idea virus about artificial general intelligence gone haywire? And they thought, why don't we do it at the most logical conference in town, the Zoom CX Summit 2025, of course. No, they launched it at the South by Southwest conference in Austin, Texas, and they did so on the most logical digital platform at the time, Tinder. Because they knew a large portion of the conference attendees would change their geo settings and their passports on Tinder to Austin, Texas, to think that maybe they would be going on a hot date later on that evening. And unbeknownst to the lovesick puppies, the marketing team behind this movie, Ex Machina, had built a avatar that looked very, very human-like without the cyborg headgear based upon the Swedish actress Alicia Vikander that you can see in this picture. And because she is female but also artificially intelligent, she was able to have a multitude of conversations at the same time with the lovesick puppies. And as part of any good customer experience, at the end of this marketing conversation, there's a good call to action which says, hey, if you want to see more pretty pictures of me, go to my Instagram account. What do you think awaited them on the Instagram account? A little message saying, you've been hacked. Here's a promotion for a movie about artificial intelligence gone haywire. Science fiction is becoming science fact. And the important lesson here is that AI now speaks human. It speaks your language, no matter whether that's English or otherwise. In fact, the coolest coding language today is no longer Java, right? It's English or Chinese or Korean. Whatever you speak is your coding language, which means we're all coders today. And my big question as part of the Zoom CX Summit today is what innovation or human impact from a CX perspective will you now code for to make your CX futuristic and even more human-centric? Now, let's fast forward from the movie Ex Machina to the present day. Recently, when OpenAI ran a little challenge for ChatGPT, the challenge was, can you hack the CAPTCHA system? Now, the CAPTCHA system we've all interfaced with online to try and get into websites where we have to prove that we as humans are not a robot. OpenAI did this with ChatGPT, and of course, it's challenging for artificial intelligence for whatever reason to get into websites or see where the zebra crossing is, which makes me really, really nervous about autonomous vehicles, by the way. But ChatGPT thought deeply about this, and they thought, why don't we go on to Airtasker or TaskRabbit, a website where you can outsource essentially any task to other human beings. And ChatGPT went on to TaskRabbit to recruit a human to see if it could hack the CAPTCHA. Now, the human got a little bit suspicious and asked the question, hey, ChatGPT, are you a robot? And of course, ChatGPT just said, how dare you, in an age of diversity, equity, and inclusion, how dare you accuse me of being a robot? I'm just vision impaired. And TaskRabbit took the money and, of course, enabled ChatGPT to get beyond the CAPTCHA and into the website. The point here is that AI is now hacking every workflow. It can hack work and increasingly can prove to humans that, hey, maybe it's a human as opposed to a robot. The difference between what's real and what's artificial is now seemingly blurring. Science fiction is becoming science fact. So if the fact that science fiction is now becoming science fact freaks you out a little bit, that's understandable. If it gives you a bit of anxiety and you wish to share that with your psychologist, and you don't have a psychologist, well, luckily, there's an AI psychologist for you on Wobot. And in fact, for teenagers today who speak to the AI psychologist, the non-human, as opposed to a human cognitive behavioral therapist, are reporting efficacy on par between the human and the robot. Now, we have to study this more from longitudinal studies perspectives, of course, over time. But in an era where it takes 9 months from a GP referral to the time you can actually see one of the humans, in an era of shortages of human psychologists, 9 months is sometimes too long. Why don't we augment our human empathy with artificial intelligence? Today, doctors and GPs and psychologists are also prescribing apps. This is new. Why do they do this? Because today, digital content is brain chemistry wrapped in story. I'll say that again. Digital content is brain chemistry wrapped in story. And we have a responsibility to our clients and customers to build digital content that reduces our cortisol levels, that are stress-free, and makes us love interacting with your brands. I think about this a lot in the context of my sons, Lucian and Aurelian, 7 and 3. And no, they're not wearing a wig. When they live with me, I live at Great Mackerel Beach, water access only, semi-off-grid. I have to take a boat to get to this national park in Sydney. It's a very naturalistic lifestyle. I think it's very soothing, not just for me, but for my kids. Now, maybe because we're a science fiction family, and I introduced Lucian in a very age-inappropriate manner to Star Wars. According to his GP, he's got a little bit of pre-anxiety. He's also learning and going through his parents' divorce. It's natural. While we waited for 9 months for him to be able to see a child psychologist, she said, go on to Headspace. Digital nutrition is brain chemistry wrapped in story. And download a story he enjoys, like Star Wars. So now on the Headspace app, every night to calm his nervous system so he can get to sleep a little bit faster, which is also good for my mental health, we get to the really good storytelling faster. Why? Because every night on the app, we do breath work with Yoda. This is mindful technology. Technology that soothes, that heals, that makes our lives more qualitative. In the US, at ABC Labs, they now treat war veterans' PTSD or post-traumatic stress disorder through the digital interface, being able to boost serotonin levels or lower cortisol levels because the interface is so beautifully designed. The customer experience is so human-centric and empathetic that you can now treat trauma through the digital interface. Is your customer experience as soothing, as healing, as the new customer expectations set by the likes of Headspace and ABC Labs? Now, as a futurist, I've obsessed for the last 20 years about our migration from the physical analog world into the digital virtual future. And the irony is, even in an age where AI has gone exponential, we still interface with it via very analog mindsets. I've told you before, if you can type, if you can speak into the AI, you can now code, but we still do it through the QWERTY keyboard, which is an old archaic artifact based upon the typewriter and which was designed to prevent jamming from the analog typewriter writing on the page. This makes absolutely no sense in a digital era, yet this is telling us something about the human ability to change and willingness to learn new things. I'm going to talk to you about this AI growth mindset today, and that we have to challenge everything. There is better design, like the Dvorak keyboard, a new user interface that is in fact 30% better and more efficient and better ergonomically for our hands when we interface with the digital technology. Why have we not deployed a better way to engage with AI remains a human mystery, but maybe there's an AI psychologist to solve for that. Now, a few years ago, I released a book called Digilogue, How to Win the Digital Minds and the Analog Hearts of Tomorrow's Customers, where I argue that even though we're migrating into a digital future, we mustn't throw away the analog baby with the digital bathwater. Centuries and eons of human care and empathy and depersonalization can in fact be scaled increasingly through an AI-powered future as well. Now, for us to truly win the digital minds and the analog hearts of tomorrow's customers, we have to do things well, both with a high-touch perspective, but also a high-tech perspective. From the perspective of human intelligence, but also artificial intelligence. And Digilogue is the sweet spot between those two, where your agents, your customer-facing staff can now have their empathy augmented through the digital interface. Let me give you an example of where we trust the AI too much. Think about the Apple Card, which was launched by Apple a few years ago. Now, Apple thought, let's just do away with bank. Let's launch a cool card that is totally fintechy. And they thought, let's also do away with FICO scores, traditional credit scoring, and let's just use our artificial intelligence instead to set the credit limits of the cards that we hand out. Now, in a big ceremony, they gave a card to Steve Wozniak, one of the founders of Apple, and to his wife. Now, by the way, they share all financial credentials equally. And in that big ceremony, amazingly, they gave him a card which had 10 times the credit limit of his wife's card. Now, why on earth was this? It was because the AI was sexist and held that women are more of a credit risk than men. Now, I don't know about you and in your family whether that holds true or not. Certainly not the case in my family. The challenge here, though, of course, in this little post-mortem on this particular launch was that it was a huge failure. When Steve Wozniak and his wife took to Twitter, now X, to complain about the inherent sexism, of course, the launch flopped. The question is, why on earth did Apple not have a human in the loop who could ethically deploy the AI and check that no errors were actually made? When you deploy AI, we have to do so responsibly. But because of AI, we're also, as customers, as clients, as patients, becoming more cognizant that we want our providers to be helped and augmented with the latest technology. Now, did you know that 80% of what gets said in a medical consult with a doctor gets forgotten by the patient? Now, this is troublesome in terms of adherence to a drug regime, or in terms of the physio that we have to do to recover and heal, etc., the drugs we should be avoiding, whatever it happens to be. If we forget 80% of what gets said in a medical consult, that's problematic. Enter the AI medical scribe Heidi Health. What is Heidi Health? Heidi Health is just an app on an iPhone that the doctor puts on his or her desk in the consult so that they can do what? Re-establish human eye contact with the patient. Is this more humane than anything we could offer in yesteryear when the doctor was taking notes or turning away to look at a different screen, turning maybe even their backs onto their clients and patients? Absolutely. What does Heidi Health do? Well, it does the robotic work that the medical doctor doesn't want to do, that they didn't train for 10 years to do, i.e. scribing. And what they do is not only they complete the electronic medical health records on behalf of the doctor, it also writes any referrals automatically so the doctor doesn't have to spend 2 or 3 hours of their everyday work, which they currently do, doing paperwork, but instead can see more human patients. And at the same time, it writes a little letter in Year 4 English to the patient so that you and I understand what on earth actually happened in that particular consult. This is beautiful. This is the AI taking the robot out of the human so that we can focus more on the meaningful and the humane rather than the menial and the mundane. And it reestablishes eye contact and empathy between the patient and the doctor at the same time. So what does the customer of the future look like? Well, think about luxury today. Today's luxury is tomorrow's expectation. 100 years ago, no one had imagined that a mobile phone, a cup of coffee, a refrigerator, and an indoor toilet would all be considered things we would take for granted. They would have all been considered futuristic luxuries. So when we think about tomorrow's customer experience, I want you to imagine that you are a futurist and remember the idea that today's luxury is tomorrow's expectation. Today's expectation of a great coffee can now be fulfilled in a predictive customer experience by Nespresso that knows when it needs to refill my pods with anticipatory shipping. This is predictive and it's solving our problems before they even occur. And this luxury will be tomorrow's expectation. So I love travel and I love my favorite airline, Qantas, a great Australian airline, very safe, and they've loved me back through many years. And it's been a great relationship and I've been afforded really luxurious VIP treatment by being a Qantas Platinum 1 member. It's an elite club, only 1,000 members qualify for it every year, and we get treated very, very well. Now recently, because I've traveled less since the pandemic, I've got young kids, etc. Sadly, Qantas and I are going through a little bit of a rough patch, a little bit of turbulence, you might even say. Recently, they downgraded me from Platinum 1 to Platinum status, and I'm left feeling at the moment a little bit like Platinum is the new Bronze. I know, first world problems, luxury problems, you'll tell me. But this really matters when you still travel a fair bit, because I no longer have access to the Canberra-based contact center. Instead, I've been outsourced to overseas, and I no longer have the sense of having a personalized concierge. And I'm left wondering in all of this though, with these various tiers of customer experience, in an age of AI, augmented humans, or even agentic AI, why should I even have to go through this? Why should anybody not feel like they're a VIP? Is there a way in the future where everyone can feel like they're a Qantas Platinum 1? And you might say, hey, wouldn't that devalue the actual experience, etc.? But let's just think about this. Wouldn't this save everyone a lot of time if everyone just had a better experience? Recently, to add insult to injury, Qantas cancelled my flight to Singapore in late March. They then had to rebook me onto another flight, and as part of that, they involuntarily downgraded me from a more premium class of travel to economy, which is a challenge for me because I'm very tall and I need to work on my way up to see my Singapore client. As part of this, I also was left by the overseas agent to also chase my refund after spending 6 hours being passed around between different peoples, having lots of handovers and me speaking the word escalate, escalate, escalate frequently, an experience I would have never have had with the Canberra-based contact center when they treated me as if I was truly Platinum 1. But this shouldn't have to be the case. In a world of agentic AI and AI augmented agents, no matter where they sit, they should be able to have personalized care. If this, then that. Nobody should have to chase a refund manually. It should be done automatically. And the experience should still feel like a luxury experience. And remember, today's luxury is tomorrow's expectation. And tomorrow, we will all be augmented by our own personal concierges. Our agentic AI representing us with any brand or any product or service that we experience. And that particular brand will be represented by an agentic AI that will be interfacing with my agentic AI so that my cortisol and your cortisol levels never have to go through the roof ever again. Wouldn't this be soothing? Now, what's the difference here between generative AI and agentic AI? Well, think about generative AI as creating something. So if you had a robot chef as being generative AI, they would come up with a cool recipe for you. They would think of new combinations for your dinner at home. But what agentic AI does is it executes on top of the creativity and it cooks you the meal. This is an era of execution of workflows, not just the creativity, but also the execution on top. Now just think about this from a travel experience for a moment. If my agentic digital concierge knows how I like to travel, which class I like to travel, which types of carbon emissions I want to pay for in terms of offsetting, what my kids like, the kind of eco resorts I want to go to and experience with them, and the types of tour providers that might give me and my 2 sons a great experience on our next holiday. I can outsource that task to a digital concierge who can do all of that agentically on my behalf. And in fact, put out my business to various bidders who will then, through their vendors and their procurement, try and win my business on my behalf, all happening seamlessly in the background. So what's the role of humans in all of this? Well, I believe there's a simple formula to all of this, and it's about how to create the most empathetic customer experience squared in the future. And that happens when humans tap into our emotional intelligence, our unique intelligence as a single human being, but also our creative intelligence. And we sprinkle a bit of digital augmentation and digital curiosity and AI growth mindset on top of it. We create the most magnificent and magical outcomes and customer experiences for our clients. Because it comes down to human creativity at the end of the day. Last week, I was spending with a number of CEOs in Melbourne, and one of the CEOs is a CEO of a major Australian sporting club. And here's where the human creativity comes in. Because he thought, how do I create a virtual board of AI agents representing the best CEOs there have ever been in any sport, to have them as my virtual board, to challenge me as a CEO? This is human creativity of how we can use the AI to get ever smarter decisions made at the C-level or at the individual level. How could you do something similar? This takes an AI growth mindset. Now, quick cap nod here to Carol Dweck's work, Stanford psychologist, on the notion of fixed mindsets versus growth mindsets, where Carol Dweck said we must get away from this idea of fixed mindset and into a growth mindset space. And I believe the same holds true when it comes to AI. Go from, hey, I'm just no good at this technology, to going, hey, what am I missing? I give up on all this new technological fandangled stuff and go, hey, I'll use a different strategy. Yes, it feels bad that my friend can do all of this tech stuff. Well, maybe you can learn from them. How are you going to pivot towards an AI growth mindset when that is ultimately required for us to ensure that we keep doing purposeful work? Let me give you an example of one of our clients that has done this really, really well. We released a report a few years ago that we co-wrote together with Microsoft on the rise of artificial intelligence for Australian retailers. And one of the really cool examples of a company that has an AI growth mindset is The Iconic. The Iconic is an online retailer, and they saw a lot of people changing their customer behavior. And I know of course none of you guys do this, but you might know some friends who do this, where they order the small, the medium, and the large in 3 different colors and order it all to come home. The Iconic had been able to develop an AI that could predict return rates with 80% accuracy. And as a result, a friendly chatbot or a human at the point of the checkout would say, hey, are you having some challenges with your sizing or your color coordination? Can I help empathetically? Can we give you some help with sizing or the color coordination? Redeploying the human to do more meaningful human work. As a result, this saves money for the Iconic that has free shipping and free returns. It's better for the planet because 20% of all returns actually end up in landfill. Terrible for the environment. And of course, it's better for profitability and it's a better experience for the customer at the end of the day, all enabled through AI. Now, if you want to develop a little bit of an AI growth mindset, a fast way to get there is through my little book club. The 3 titles I would recommend to all of you is Super Intelligence, is Nexus, and Super Agency. Now, if you feel like you don't have time to read 3 books to develop an AI growth mindset, just download them onto your Spotify or whatever it happens to be and listen to them at 1.5x the speed, and you'll get there really, really, really fast. What I think we've learned through the last few years is that the digital touch is now the most human touch. It's the best customer experience. The contactless touch we learned about during the pandemic. And of course, today, increasingly, the digital interface is showing that we can scale our human empathy through the digital sphere. Let me give you a couple of examples of this. This is my grandmother, Ingrid. She was a beautiful woman, and sadly, she passed away 20 years ago. I miss her and think about her often. And the last few years she spent alone after my grandfather had passed away. She still kept living in the house, still trying to manage it. And she started having falls, tragically, which is very, very dangerous at her particular age. She was above 80 years of age. And the best thing the doctors could do 20 years ago was to give her a big necklace with a big red button on it in case she had a fall. Very reactive response. What if she hit her head? She couldn't actually have alerted anyone. Now, compare and contrast that to the present era, where we're wearing our hearts on our sleeves, literally. And smart watches, hearables, wearables can tell based upon our gait whether we're likely to have a fall in the near future, alerting our loved ones to the fact that we might not be doing so well. Based upon the Oura ring, which I wear, I can tell that based upon my current levels of fitness, and given I live 168 stairs up from Mackerel Beach in Sydney, the Oura ring can tell me how exhausting this is going to be 10 years into the future. This is predictive customer experience. Not just telling us how we'll live our lives, but also giving rise to the idea that we can live more quality-filled lives for longer. Singapore has just been announced as a digital blue zone, a blue zone 2.0. What on earth are blue zones and why are they important for customer experience, Anders? Well, blue zones are these areas in the world, oftentimes around the equator. They might be in Okinawa in Japan, they might be in Sardinia, they might be in beautiful islands in Greece, for example. And these are places where they have an abundance of centenarians. Centenarians who live very long, meaningful, purpose-led lives, and they've done so culturally and traditionally through eons, through centuries of fine-tuning their style of life, their lifestyles. Now, this is hard to replicate, right? In places like Chicago or New York or Singapore or Sydney, for example. But Singapore has mastered this. They've done this through innovation. In fact, in the last 10 years, Singapore has doubled its prevalence of centenarians, doubled its prevalence of 90 to 100-year-olds and 80 to 100-year-olds by innovating its medical system, by, of course, deploying the latest in new technologies so that we can live better lives. This really is the future of customer experience, not just creating a great customer experience in the present moment, but ensuring that you live a better life for longer. What can we learn by creating digital blue zones and think about this as challenging ourselves to create even better customer experiences, even more longevity-focused experiences with our brands, no matter where you live in the world or how you interface with your customers and clients. Just think about this from the perspective of if we throw AI fuel onto the fire to make workflows simpler. One little innovation we had to have a massive pandemic to truly launch, but which was around way before, is e-signatures, digital signatures. Now, who misses the good old days of plenty of paperwork, of printing, scanning, signing, sending stuff back with a pigeon? Those days used to suck. Today, we have digital e-signatures instead to just help us with one part of our workflows. Now, these can shorten sales cycles from 8 days to 3 hours, get agreements signed 21 times faster. Cost and revenue implications is that it reduces costs by up to 30% and increases revenue by over 35% according to studies. And of course, when it comes to your internal talent-facing experiences, you can onboard new hires up to 80% faster. This is amazing. It's just one little breakthrough that made all of our lives easier. What's going to happen when you start deploying artificial intelligence on top of your workflows? How do you want to re-equip your agents to become super agents, to become superheroes? What's the mantle of AI and technology that you want to equip them with so that they can engage both in an analog and digital fashion to win both minds as well as hearts of your future customers? What are all the touch points? What are the types of AI that you can use to make sure that happens? Let me give you one final example to challenge your thinking and to redesign the future of CX. At UPS, a delivery company in the United States where they drive on the correct side of the road, the right-hand side of the road, a few years ago, they said at an event similar to this, somebody looked at the data and said 22.5% of all vehicle accidents happen when we turn left into oncoming traffic. We have associated personal injury claims, trucks are out of action, it just slows us down and we waste lots of precious resources by doing this. Why don't we just stop turning left? If you're in Singapore, read right. Now, this harebrained human idea of human creativity then got tested by deploying GPS technology, RFID tags and telematics onto their trucks to see whether this harebrained idea had any merit, and of course it did. As a result of no longer turning left, UPS now traces 350,000 more parcels delivered every year because of this one decision. Now also compounded with the AI Orion continuous route optimization plan every year to happy customers. It saves time and it saves on precious planetary resources, being good for people, planet, as well as profits. What's your equivalent of no longer turning left? What will you do from a CX innovation perspective that is the equivalent breakthrough to what we've seen at UPS? Now, futurists don't leave you with 3 silver bullet points to fix all your problems, but we do like to ask questions to tap into your unique intelligence, your creative intelligence, and your emotional intelligence. And my first question to you is, how will you get 2x the result with half the effort? Through the deployment of technology, yes, but also human creativity. What old analog processes don't offer you any immediately actionable data insights and need upgrading immediately? What's the compound effect of your competition adopting the right exponential technologies while you simply don't by the end of 2025? And finally, what would your competition not want you to do next? Ladies and gentlemen, start preparing for a new, more human-centric, technology-enabled future of customer experience, because it is where you, your kids, and your grandkids are going to spend the rest of your lives. Thank you very much, and over to the Zoom team to take things into the future from here. And I'll see you in the live Q&A shortly.